everybody. Today I'm here to present Tayyab Safdar that will discuss global China in Pakistan. And this is part of a conversation of the research initiative Mapping Global China. That is a project that provides maps, dataset, and research on Chinese overseas engagement, including but not limited to the Belt and Road Initiative. And the goal of the project is to provide the broader public with a more nuanced understanding of global China's past, present, and future, and its geopolitical, legal, economic, and environmental impact. And today we're here with Tayyab Safdar, that completed his MPhil and PhD in development studies from the University of Cambridge. And his current research looks at the emerging dynamics of South-South development cooperation, especially after the launch of the BRI in 2013. And his research also looks at the economic and political dimension of increasing Chinese investment on host countries that are part of the BRI, focusing in particular on the China-Pakistan economic corridor. And Tayyab research has been published in various journals, among which the Journal of Development Studies and Energy for Sustainable Development. So thank you so much, Tayyab, for being here with us today. And can you tell us a bit more about Pakistan? And I want to start with a question of where do you see global China in Pakistan today?
Thank you very much, Adele. Thank you for inviting me to talk about my research and some of the projects that we've been looking at. So global China is present throughout Pakistan, especially after the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor was launched in 2015. The state-owned enterprises have expanded their presence, especially in the energy sector, across Pakistan in almost all of the provinces. So global China, especially, one can see it out there in the form of these state-owned enterprises as they've expanded in different parts of the world after the BRI's launch, especially after the BRI's launch in developing countries like Pakistan.
Very good, thank you. And can you give us some more concrete examples of Chinese presence in Pakistan?
Sure. So I'll be talking about three projects that I've looked at in Pakistan. So all of them are power plants. The first one that we look at over here, which I thought was really interesting, so I've used your data that you've created, and this is in Tharparkar, which is a district in Sindh province of Pakistan, and it is home to one of the largest coal reserves, lignite coal reserves in the world. So as you can see, pre-project time, there's absolutely nothing. So this is one of the poorest areas within Sindh as well. If you sort of look at on the right-hand side picture, we can still see that there's a sea of darkness, but there's some illumination that you see. So that's the power plant that's come online in this area, and the work that's been ongoing by Chinese firms, different Chinese firms within this part of the world. And if you look at the bottom sort of row of pictures, you can see the mine, open pit mine, and the power plant coming to life as well. But what these pictures, I think, do not see is, do not show us, and I think that's important for us to understand, especially with the context of developing countries, is the close relationship between the provincial governments and the national government in Pakistan and Chinese state-owned enterprises to actually bring these projects to life. So as I said, Tharparkar was not very well connected with the rest of Sindh province before this as well. So infrastructure was weak. There weren't a lot of economic opportunities for local people as well. However, the Pakistani government, especially the government of Sindh and the China Machinery Engineering Corporation, which is responsible for Block 2, or which sort of came on board in Block 2, came together to sort of build the infrastructure, to put all of these things in place. And that is what we see now in the form of the power plant being operational as well. And the other point that is important to understand, this on the right is the the power plant, and on the left is the open pit mine. The other point which is important from this perspective, from our perspective to understand, is that there has been economic or there has been employment generation for local people within this particular part of Pakistan as well. Economic opportunities before this activity was generated was largely limited. Now there are more economic opportunities for local people as well. The problem with a lot of these economic opportunities is that they are short term in nature. There isn't a lot of economic there isn't a lot of job security. And once the power plants are built and once these mines are built, what happens next? And I think that is one of those questions which continues to uh, vex policymakers within developing countries like Pakistan, but should also be important for Chinese state owned enterprises as they expand their presence in these different spaces. The other
Thank,
project,
sorry, thank you. I think that was also very interesting. I have a just quick follow-up. Do
yeah.
you think these projects are part of a broader plans from China, from the central government? Because it seems that from what you said, that they build and that's it, right? There isn't really a longer term thinking about these projects. Is that the case, or like even for this Tarpakar power plant, uh, they build it and that's it, but there's no broader consideration, supply chain networks. For instance, this mine, is it connected to what? Yeah.
So this mine is connected to the power plant on the right. So this is an open pit mine, and this is going to supply four power plants, which are 330 megawatt each. So from a long-term perspective, Adele, uh, it's so Chinese firms have taken a stake in the system, right? So CMEC, which is a part of Sinomac, which is one of the largest Chinese state-owned enterprises, has taken an equity stake not only in the mining company, which is a public-private partnership between the government of Sindh, the CMEC, and uh, conglomerates, Pakistani conglomerates. Similarly, in the power plants, which are once again, they are joint ventures between CMEC and different Pakistani conglomerates. So they do have skin in the game. It's not as if the Chinese are just putting these power plants in and they're not worrying about how to, so whether they're going to run, whether they're going to be sustainable in that sort of a perspective, economic perspective or not. Uh, so they've taken that. The other point of the economic bit is how to generate local jobs. So the point that I was alluding to relates more to generating, sort of jobs for local people within these areas. Again, as I said, this area is not urbanized. Job opportunities are much more limited. So in a broader sort of a context going forward, how do you generate jobs for local people with lower skill sets in these areas? I think that's more of a challenge as far as this particular project is concerned.
Thank you. And can you also tell us a bit more about other projects that
Sure.
illustrate global China? Thank you.
Yes. So the next project that I did a lot of field work. So I've done field work. I did field work in Pakistan for a year and a half, and I visited all of these sites. The other one that I wanted to talk about is the Power China project in Karachi. So once again, this is a coal-fired power plant. It's a 1320 megawatt plant, which is big, but this is not based on local coal. So the third project was based on an open pit mine, which is linked to the power plants that are being built in Tharparkar. This project is based on imported coal because lignite coal does not really, its calorific value is low, so therefore it does not it is not the best quality coal for power generation. Once again, what we can see from this particular picture, because again, Port Qasim is in Karachi, which is a metropolitan city within Pakistan. If we look at the pre and post project elimination, there isn't a major difference within this. So once again, because it's a much more urbanized area, there's more economic activity, or there was more economic activity within this part of Pakistan to start off with. We can see from both the pictures on the left and on the right that there isn't a lot of change as far as the illumination levels are concerned. Um, and we can see, that it's next to the port of Karachi, etc. And that's why, we don't find that sort of a change as far as illumination is concerned. But this project is interesting because what the map does not show us is, and these are once again pictures from the project site. What this map does not show us is the challenge that Power China has been facing in terms of getting a more stable connection to the Pakistani national grid. Because once the power plant is built, outside the power plant, getting that grid or evacuating that power to the national grid is the responsibility of the national transmission and dispatch company. Because the downstream, sort of infrastructure is weak, that means that Power China, even though they built the power plant in like 2 years or something of that sort, which is very short as far as a power plant of this, this wattage is concerned, the power plant has been facing operational challenges because the grid is weak. So therefore, evacuating power from this power plant to the national grid has been a major challenge for the NTDC, the National Transmission and Dispatch Company, which is run by the Pakistanis, and also for Power China, because the power plant keeps tripping, because the grid system, the transmission system just cannot sustain the amount of power that's entering the system. Now, in order to deal with this problem better, the Chinese have now built a high voltage, power line as well to evacuate power from these power plants. But still, over the last 3-4 years, Power China has been struggling to make sure that the power that they're generating from this power plant can actually meet or can actually, sort of enter the grid to, sort of generate that value, which leads us to this sort of the second sort of the implication from this discussion. And that is that even if China comes in and or Chinese firms come in and put money in power generation, in many of these developing countries, years of underinvestment in the downstream part, which is transmission and the distribution of power, means that the positive impact of the power plants is much more muted. So till the time that you can deal with some of these supply side bottlenecks downstream, the fact that you're putting money only in the generation bit of it creates other issues downstream.
This is a great overview of the project and the many challenges. And it seems that like one of the challenges is also environmental. These are all coal power plants, and it's a bit against what Xi Jinping claimed, but BRI, greening BRI. And I think in your third project, you're going to discuss a bit more also the environmental aspect. But yeah, so maybe you can just jump ahead to the third project, tell more about this environmental impact, because it seems is not doing very, doesn't have like positive effect for the environment to do coal power plants again.
True. So Adele, one needs to understand. So this is a very interesting point that you've raised. In developing countries like Pakistan, for example, and we've seen the impact of climate change with the floods that are ongoing in Pakistan as well, and the drought in China. But the argument that policymakers make in countries like Pakistan is that we are not the ones who are responsible for the climate challenge. We need power in order to grow. So for us, coal is a cheaper alternative as compared to something like gas. The way that LNG prices are going up, So the argument that's made by policymakers within developing countries is that China is bringing in all of this money. It gives us a cheaper source of power, especially for the base load. So it makes sense for us. But of course, there are challenges. And the third project that I'm going to talk about sort of highlights some of these challenges. This project, again, a 1320 megawatt power project, which is a joint venture between Huaning Power, which is one of the largest Chinese state-owned enterprises in the power sector, and Shandong Ruyi, which is a textile firm, but it has diversified interests within sort of different business areas as well. This power plant, once again, is located in Sahiwal, as you can see from the bottom pictures. This is Pakistan's agricultural heartland. So if you look at all of the pictures, especially if you focus on the pictures below, you can see that all around the power plant there is farmland. And this is the sort of wheat basket as far as Pakistan is concerned. Uh, and having such a large, and if you see the picture which is on the left, you can see the water, sort of which the water pond, which is very important for power plants as well as the coal which is stacked in the sort of yard next to it. So, and this is the power plant. So this is the picture. This is a large turbine. The turbine's been supplied by Chinese firms as well, and almost all of the equipment, etc., has come from China itself, apart from the most basic goods like cement, bricks, etc., which have been procured locally. But if we come back to the environmental impact, there's been a lot of questions and there's been a lot of discussion about the long run impact of this coal, especially this coal-fired power plant, on the local environment. Uh, Also on people's health, but not only on health, but on agricultural productivity. Now, the problem is that there aren't a lot of long term, or haven't been any robust studies on whether, since the time that this power plant has been built in 2017, whether there have been any adverse impacts as far as agricultural productivity is concerned, and on people's health. Because one of the things that the Chinese firm, because I went there and I talked to managers at this site as well, and they say that the kind of sort of environmental safeguards that they've tried to put in at this particular site are probably equal to, if not better than, the standards that the World Bank sets. So they make sure that they minimize the kind of sort of wind-based flow of coal particulates is concerned. They make sure that all of the material, all of the waste material that is created by the power generation project, they make sure that they treat it. They make sure that they treat the water as well, and they invest in water conservation so that there isn't that sort of a impact as far as water supply in this area is concerned. But of course, if you talk to local people within these areas, they talk about how having a coal power plant next to their farmland and next to their houses, because there are villages in the vicinity as well, has already started to have an impact on the health of their health, the health of their livestock, because again, livestock is a very important part as far as the local economy is concerned, and on the yields of their agricultural lands as well. So there are all of these stresses as far as having these coal-fired power plants within sort of within agriculturally important, but more importantly, politically important areas are concerned as well. Because as local politicians or as local stakeholders, politicians need to then sort of talk to their constituents as well. In Tharparkar, interestingly enough, that local voice is much more muted. But in the case of Sahiwal, which is, as I said, is in the agricultural heartland of Pakistan, the political voice is much stronger. So again, when we talk about global China, the interaction with local power structures is what is fascinating to see. Because on the one hand, you have the sort of quest for expansion and we've seen all of this. It could be geopolitical. In this particular case, it's capital accumulation, because the kind of returns that a lot of these Chinese firms are making are quite substantial. So I don't think the political is that important in this case. But at the end of the day, they have to interact with diverse stakeholders. So in the first example I talked about, they had to work with the local government, the provincial government, and the local conglomerates. In the second example, working with the port authority, making sure, working with the NTDC, making sure that power evacuation can take place. And in the third example, working with local communities, because that is a big challenge as far as coal is concerned, especially in areas like Sahiwal, which are agriculturally rich, which have more of a political voice as far as the local economy is concerned.
Thank you so much. I mean, it seems from what you're saying, for this this excellent overview of some of the projects, that global China seems entangled with local realities as well, right? And those are inescapable eventually. And so I think you add a layer of complexity to this global China, right? That is not just this monolith, but it has to articulate in particular terrain with particular people, community, and so forth. And so given that, how is this global China doing overall? What is the overall impact of this project? Because we want development, right? But then development comes at a cost, environmental cost, the lack maybe of job creation. We wanted to have like more job created, but that was not the case in the first example that you pointed out. So economic, political. So how would you overall, like more broadly, like assess these projects in Pakistan and the presence of China there? Yeah.
So that's a very interesting and a very complex question, Adele. So in the short run, most definitely this power was needed, right? In the short run, Pakistan had serious power problems brought on by multiple different reasons, and I don't want to get into them. But these projects have definitely alleviated those supply constraints. It's become, or it's improved uh, energy security in the way that there's more use of local fuel resources, right? In the first example, I showed you the open pit mine, etc. That sort of reduced the cost of generation. But the problem or the challenge with global China, especially in developing countries, is uh, that getting that productive investment remains a challenge. So if you have all of these power plants in place and you have to pay these Chinese state-owned enterprises and their local partners, you know, for the electricity that they're generating, without having productive investments in the industrial sphere, it becomes more difficult. And we've seen this in multiple different cases. In Pakistan's case, we see this now. Pakistan's gone to the IMF. Now there's a lot of debate, especially here in the US, that, why should we bail them out? Because, it's the Chinese that created this mess. But people forget that Pakistan's been back to the IMF since the 1990s. It's perhaps the country that's been to the IMF the most. So most of these problems that people keep alluding to, or highlighting that these are Chinese problems, they're not Chinese creations. These are structural issues that face the Pakistani economy. So once again, the interaction of global China with these local structural problems further accentuates a lot of these issues, because there isn't a lot of productive investment, right? So there isn't, what happens to all of the power that you're generating? Does it go only for domestic consumption? Is it going to be used for industrial, sort of production or not? How do you pay for the electricity that's generated? Those are some of the more pertinent questions that keep coming forward. And of course, COVID has made these problems worse in the case of these developing countries, which has contributed to a rethink as far as these investments are concerned. Not only COVID, but also the increase in commodity prices. So once again, countries like Pakistan, they face higher balance of payments crises going forward because of the increase in commodity prices. So the balancing act for global China is is more difficult because of the broader geopolitical environment, but also because of the particular economic problems that are, you know, that keep appearing in countries like Pakistan. So, if the Pakistani government says that we want to extend the period of time that we will pay these loans from 10 to 20 years, how do you negotiate with them? If they say we want to reduce the return on equity that you're making within these power plants, how do you negotiate with them? I think that's an ongoing challenge, and that's going to remain a challenge as Chinese firms continue to expand across different parts of the world. The environmental challenge is, of course, there. So even though you might say that you've built in the best environmental safeguards, etc., you're always going to open yourself to criticism by investing in dirty fuels like coal. But once again, as I said in the earlier part of my discussion as well, local policymakers see this differently. They say that okay, we understand that coal is dirty, but we need the power, right? We need that power to sort of make sure that our cities keep running. Um, we need this capacity to have sort of a stable base load. Even if we do invest in renewables, our grids just cannot sustain the impact of having higher levels of renewable energy within our overall power mix. Uh, so there are all of these tensions, and there are all of these different sort of threads that one keeps sort of coming across as one tries to understand the interaction of global Chinese firms with local power stakeholders. And I think what is interesting, or what is important for us to note as well, is uh, that the Chinese, when we talk about China, there's no monolithic China, right? SOEs are concerned with their bottom lines. Yes, they want to go out. They got subsidized credit, but they're getting substantial returns in place as well. And sometimes their incentives might not align with the incentives of the Chinese state in countries like Pakistan as well. So, for example, in Pakistan, the Chinese state might have global, geopolitical interest, but for Chinese state-owned enterprises like CMEC, like Huaneng, like Power China, the bottom line is important as well. Making money is important for them as well. So there are all of these tensions that one keeps, sort of coming across as one studies China and its interaction, or Chinese firms and global China and its interaction with developing countries.
Thank you. This was terrific. And the last thing to conclude, so if you were to give recommendations to solve like some of these issues in Pakistan, make this project more sustainable or producing more jobs, what would be a recommendations for Pakistani government or for China? You can choose.
So I think for the Pakistani government, it's very getting the you've got you so you say that you've dealt with the supply side issue. So energy was a big problem. I'm not saying it wasn't pre 2013 when the Chinese started building, or 2015 when the Chinese started building these power plants. But now that you've got this power in, how do you convert this power into productive investments, especially focusing on industrial cooperation and on industrial, sort of development? I think that is a lot of people now don't give as much importance to this sort of the productive use of energy. But I think that is for both the Chinese firms involved in these power plants as well as for these developing countries, without having avenues to use this power productively, it is always going to remain a challenge. These structural problems will remain there. So that's perhaps the challenge both for China, the Chinese government that interacts with these developing countries, as well as for developing country governments. How do you make these power or these inputs? How do you convert them into something which is more productive? I think that's a major challenge.
Thank you so much, Tayyab. It was great having you here and presenting this fascinating projects. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Adele. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about my research. And I think the map's wonderful. I think it will be really useful going forward.
Great.